Chapter 25, The Return of the Whisper. Micah walked along the familiar streets of the south side as evening settled in, and for the first time since the great gathering he felt a faint stirring at the edge of his spirit, not dark, but alerting, like a whisper brushing past the surface of his awareness. The city had changed, yet change always invited resistance, and Micah sensed that something unseen was testing the boundaries of the newfound peace. He paused in front of a mural painted with bright blues and golds, a community project birthed during the revival, and he prayed quietly, asking God to reveal the source of the whisper. A verse rose within him, Psalm 46 verse 10, commanding him to be still and know that God is God. As he obeyed, the whisper clarified, not as a threat but as a warning, preparing him for a new phase of his calling. Micah exhaled slowly, bracing himself for the next depth of spiritual understanding God was ushering him into. Chapter 26, The Dream in the Second Watch. That night, Micah dreamed with a vividness that felt more real than waking life. He found himself standing in a vast field of tall grass under a moonlit sky, Chicago's skyline glowing faintly in the distance. A gentle figure approached, faceless yet radiant, and Micah felt a peace that surpassed understanding, the kind spoken of in Philippians chapter 4 verse 7. The figure stretched out a hand, showing him a vision of the city from above, light blossoming in neighborhoods like stars scattering across the landscape, but he also saw shadows gathering at the edges, slow and deliberate. The figure's voice echoed like wind through trees, telling him that revival did not end the struggle, but strengthened the hearts of those called to stand in it. When Micah awakened, his pillow was damp with tears he did not remember shedding, and he knew the dream was not symbolic but instructional, a divine preparation for what lay ahead. Chapter 27, The Council of the Faithful. Pastor Daniels called a meeting the next morning, summoning the leaders who had stood alongside Micah since the beginning, Sister Amari, Brother Lucas, Mrs. Alvarez, and two younger pastors from the west side who had recently joined the movement. They gathered in the fellowship hall, sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows, casting blues and reds across the table. Micah shared his dream in detail, and the room fell silent as they listened, recognizing the weight behind his words. Lucas opened his Bible to Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12, reminding them that their struggle was not against flesh and blood but against spiritual forces of wickedness in unseen realms. Amari nodded, saying she had sensed a similar shift during her morning prayer, a tremor in the spirit. They agreed to increase their times of intercession, not out of fear, but out of spiritual readiness, understanding that God was equipping them for a higher level of assignment. Chapter 28, The Shadow at Midday. 2 days later, while Micah walked near the Red Line station on Roosevelt, he felt a sudden heaviness settle over him, not oppressive like the battles before, but sharp, focused, and strategic. The air around him fell unnaturally still, and pedestrians walked past unaware while a spiritual tension thickened like invisible fog. Micah closed his eyes, steadying himself with scripture, recalling Isaiah chapter 54 verse 17, which declares that no weapon formed against God's people shall prosper. As he prayed, he saw the shadow clearly in his mind's eye, not a figure but a presence, probing the boundaries of the peace that had come over Chicago. Rather than shrinking back, Micah stepped forward in faith, whispering God's promises with boldness, and the tension broke, dissolving as quickly as it had formed. He knew then that the revival had drawn attention from beyond the physical world, and that darkness sought to reclaim territory it had lost. Chapter 29, The Test of Voice. Pastor Daniels invited Micah to speak during the Sunday service, sensing that God had given him a new message to deliver. The sanctuary filled early, families and elders and young people piling in with expectation. Micah felt nervous for the first time in weeks, wondering if he was ready, but Daniels reminded him gently of 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 27, which says God often chooses the weak things of the world to confound the mighty. When Micah stepped to the pulpit, he felt his fear melt away, replaced with the same warm clarity that had guided him since the beginning. He spoke of perseverance, of standing firm even when peace was challenged, of trusting God to complete what he had started. His voice grew stronger as he preached, not loud but steady, and people leaned forward as though receiving exactly what they had needed. When he finished, the congregation stood in unified worship, the presence of God settling over them like a mantle. Chapter 30, The New Commission. That evening, Micah returned once more to the lakefront, drawn by a quiet conviction he could not ignore. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with deep purples and golds, and the city lights flickered to life behind him. He prayed for guidance, asking God what the next step would be, and an overwhelming peace washed over him. In the stillness, he sensed a new commission forming, not spoken aloud but carved into his spirit. He was to help raise others, training them in discernment, prayer, and spiritual vigilance so the revival would not fade but flourish. He realized then that Chicago's transformation was only the beginning, a spark that would spread from neighborhood to neighborhood, and eventually beyond the city itself. Pastor Daniels joined him quietly, as if led by the same prompting, and together they watched the water shimmer under the night sky. Daniels quoted Matthew chapter 5 verse 14, reminding Micah that they were called to be the light of the world, a city set on a hill that could not be hidden. Micah nodded, heart steady, knowing that his purpose had expanded once more, guided entirely by the hand of God.